really wanted to get on the ball, especially as the new school year was beginning, with implementing this. And so earlier this month, I announced the formation of a Mayor's Youth Council. We wanted to do this specifically in a way so that it wasn't just sort of Student Council 2.0, a popularity contest among students. We really wanted to make an effort to make sure that we're hearing from voices we might not ordinarily hear from. And so we identified several areas of particular interest where we're looking for representation. The arts, youth athletics and activities, young scholars, future public servants, people who are interested in serving in elected office in the future, those who are interested and involved in community service, those who are interested in the environment, whether it be our built environment or natural environment. And we want to make sure that the minority voices of our youth are heard. So if we weren't going to have just an open election at Laurens 55 or Laurens Academy for who would sit on this council, how do we select the members? Well, we've put out the call in media for anyone who is interested. I'm telling you all here tonight, if you're interested, let us know. Talk to your teachers, your coaches, anybody that could forward a nomination to the city on your behalf. And we anxiously look forward for those nominations to come in the coming weeks. We've already gotten a few in, but we really felt like teachers and coaches and school officials would be best suited. They know you better than we certainly could. And we believe that our teachers also have the opportunity to identify their students that have particular promise and particular ability. So we'll get in those applications and notify the 7 representatives who have been chosen. But it's something we're terribly excited about. One, because we want to hear from you. We make decisions, the 7 of us who sit up here make decisions about the future of the city, but really we're building the future of the city for you. And we think it's important that you have a say in that. And so we want to hear from you. We want to hear your ideas and inputs about things that we can do or do better. Also, it might be a good opportunity for you to learn a little bit about what we do and see some of the behind-the-scenes action. So I'll be glad to meet with our youth council at City Hall, introduce y'all to members of our department staff, leadership. And finally, the thing I really want to give credit to our city administrator for this idea is we want to put some action to this council and do it immediately. So we'll get together and come up with a project. And that could be anything from raising awareness about a particular issue to building something. The thing that we do is going to be contingent and dependent upon the input that we get from you. I want y'all to have buy-in. And then we'll work together with city staff to actually get some stuff done. But it's an incredibly exciting thing. This is our own particular spin on it that's a little bit different from the way other cities have done it. But I'm incredibly optimistic about this program, and I hope this is something that becomes part of the way we govern the city for a long, long, long time to come. So let us know if you're interested. The deadline for those applications is coming up soon, FYI, August 30th. So if you do have interest, tell your teachers, tell your coaches, let us know. We've been really busy cutting ribbons around here. Last week we had 4 ribbon cuttings last week alone. During the past month, we had the salon on Hillcrest open. Groucho's Deli of Laurens had their ribbon cutting. United Community Bank replaced their building, which had been there since the mid-50s, with a brand spanking new state-of-the-art banking facility, but one that also complements the architecture and feel of our historic downtown area. And something that I know everybody in this room, I hope, is excited about. We cut the ribbon at Big Air. Big Air is a tremendous investment by Jake Cooper and his family, an investment in the future of Laurens. And I think that faith in the future of this city is something worthy of particular recognition. We get a little tired of hearing sometimes there's nothing for young folks to do. Well, there is now. So we hope the entire community enjoys it. The other fun thing about that is he also holds the proprietary rights for that franchise for a larger area. So Saluda, McCormick, over to Greenwood, down to Newberry, basically up to the Greenville area. All that territory is controlled by Laurens Big Air. And so people will be coming from far and wide to the city to have a little fun. So I just want to take this time to really ask our city to support this really great investment and show that we are bought in to this facility the way they have bought into us. Hopefully it's not too much of an arm twist for anybody here to go jump on a trampoline. It's fun. It's fun. They invited us out. You'll see that there is new directional signage that's going up across the city. We began that with new signage that was installed at the Streets and Sanitation Department yesterday. So if you haven't been by there yet on Caroline Street, take a look. But that is a foreshadowing of things to come here at the new municipal center, at the fire departments, at our parks. So stay tuned for that. If you got your calendars out or your phones out, I want to give you a few save the dates. Everyone is encouraged to come out. So the American Legion Post 25 is hosting the grand opening of their new facility on September 28th at 3 p.m. That's a Saturday. They have specifically asked that members of City Council attend that. September 28th at 3. The Laurens Police Department will be holding National Night Out on the evening of October 1st. That's a Tuesday, from 6 to 8 p.m. And that will be on the square downtown over to the splash pad. There'll be a car show, lots of free giveaways. The cool thing that I learned about from the chief is with National Night Out, the only requirement for that program is if you're going to do stuff, it has to be free. So members of the public, come out, get free stuff, enjoy a good time. We'll have Boo in the Park back at the Ridge on October 31st on Halloween. What day is Halloween? October 31st. It's amazing how we get that question year after year. Veterans Day is Monday this year, November 11th, and so we will be taking part in the county's celebrations as they dedicate the new Veterans Monument on the grounds of the Laurens County Library. We are planning a wreath-laying ceremony, which will begin on the square, and then a procession which will lead us from the square to the county's event at the library. So 10 a.m. We'll be glad to provide additional details about the county celebration as we get them. I know this seems like a little while out, but it's actually one of the biggest events of the year. We have our tree lighting on the square on the evening of December 6th, and that will be followed the next day by our Christmas parade at 4:30 on December 7th. That's Saturday. You take note that that is 30 minutes earlier than it was in the previous year because we got feedback from the public. They want to be able to save floats, so we're kicking off just a little bit early this year. Hopefully won't get delayed by any events like we did last year. Come join us again. All righty. That's all the announcements I have. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is public participation in the hearing portion of our evening. Because this is both a public comment period and a public hearing, for those matters on the agenda where a hearing is required, those who wish to speak are invited to approach the podium. For all other matters, speakers would need to sign up 24 hours in advance. Looking at our city administrator, it does not appear we have any advance speakers. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward for the hearing portion? Hearing none, I will move us on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda has two items: approval of tonight's agenda and the minutes from our regular council meeting of July 16th. Do I hear any motions concerning the consent agenda?
I make a motion we accept the consent agenda as printed.
Second motion.
Ooh, that was a Lowry and I think a Campbell second, but don't hold me to it. Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda as printed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the consent agenda is approved. Moving on with tonight's agenda, which we just approved, that takes us to old business. First off, under old business, we have ordinance 7-24-01, which is an annexation ordinance by way of 100% petition for two parcels of real property containing 20.426 acres and 0.812 acres. This is, as council may be aware, the site of the former Watts Mill. This annexation is only the site of the former Watts Mill and not any of the neighborhood surrounding the Watts Mill, just for the sake of clarity. Don't hear any motions concerning this ordinance.
I'll make a motion to accept this ordinance. Yep, because I'm excited to see it.
I second it.
That's a very clear motion in a second by Councilor Bolt and Councilor Lattimore. Is there any discussion?
I ask a question.
Yes, Ms. Sullivan.
Okay, my questions are regarding, and this is because some health things have come up. The planning commission is, this is a stupid question really. The planning commission is the ones that does the research for the soil and water and stuff like that, right? And then they pass it to us, or is that something we approve after we receive? I don't know, so I'm just asking a question.
No, so I think that would be a request for clarification on whether or not the Planning Commission is the one that approves soil testing and that sort of thing.
Right.
They do not. That is something that's actually handled through DHEC, Department of Health and Environmental Control.
Okay. Now, this is my question because I'm not new to this, but I'm new with discussing new developments because we haven't had developments. There's been a report of various health issues in a certain area. And my question is concerning the site, if DHEC has already went through those steps, which I know they have. For transparency, I'm asking these questions as it relates to soil and water, because we know some people that has worked there in the past, some sites, not that specifically site, but mill sites, has had certain health issues. So if someone was to come and ask, where would we find that information for that research?
Okay. So we have Stormy Ellenberg here, who's a representative from the developer, and I will ask Ms. Ellenberg to stand up real quickly in case I get anything wrong.
Okay.
but I believe I can answer those questions.
Thank you.
The soil samples and the environmental testing that need to be done have been submitted to DHEC for their study and approval.
Right,
So to begin where you ended, the testing and results from that, I believe, should be public information that would be available from DHEC if it needs to be verified. You are very correct to point out that mill sites frequently have environmental issues.
right,
So there's different kinds of mills that do different things, right?
Right, right.
There's, for instance, Lawrence Mill, not the site we're talking about, Lawrence Mill here in town, was involved in more cotton manufacturing, cotton textile
right,
manufacturing, from what I understand. While Watts Mill also was involved in cotton textile manufacturing in its later years, from what I understand, they also were involved in the production of some other synthetic fabrics. And anytime you are dealing with the dyeing and those sorts of processes related to any textile, that can involve some pretty gnarly stuff,
right, yeah,
to use a legal term there. But part of the 2.5-year delay in actually bringing this matter to council was dealing with those environmental issues, making sure that materials that needed to be removed from the site
right,
had been removed, and working out what that looked like from a transactional standpoint between the former owner and the present owner.
okay,
But those environmental health issues have been taken into control. The steps to remediate that have been laid out by DHEC. And so while our planning commission obviously doesn't have the sort of skill and expertise that DHEC would have in doing that testing, we do have confirmation that that testing has occurred.
okay.
Does that help answer your question?
That does help answer my question a lot, because as I stated, there is some questions arising, and I will share about myself later, sometime later, but, that helps me to decide if I want to move forward with something, because our job as an organization, public body, is to make sure that we're providing it. And those questions are for transparency, because there was a question in my mind about it, because I didn't see it.
Sure.
That's all.
Yeah, so what is before, I didn't want to be super technical and rule you out of order on this. So the only thing that we have before us tonight here is an annexation petition. Just the only question is, at least
Right,
till we have another motion at a different point in the meeting, whether this is property that comes into the city limits.
okay,
I think those other issues might be
later on.
pertinent later on.
Relevant.
But since we have Stormy here and she's at the podium, would you like to provide any additional clarity?
Yes, just for matters of transparency. Can you hear me
Yes,
okay?
I can.
I totally understand the sensitivity around that. I
Right.
too get very frustrated, just even looking at what's in our food. Sometimes it can be very disheartening.
Right.
Especially with a child myself, so completely understand. One point I want to just make very clear is this can only get cleaner, and we will clean it as much as we possibly can.
Okay,
So we are working with a group called BLE, Bundle Lehman's Engineering. They're an environmental group, environmental engineers that specialize in this. And every step that they take is governed by South Carolina DHEC. That is being done through a program called the VCC program, a voluntary cleanup contract, which is required to be made public. So every document as it pertains to the VCC will be made public. And every document pertaining to the VC will include, it's everything from start to finish.
Okay.
So including moving the soil around and how that is handled. So we can't actually get into that yet.
Right.
They call it a media management plan.
Right.
So you cannot actually get into that until you have your grading set, because they don't know how and where we're pushing the dirt. So once we
Gotcha.
have the grading plan, that'll be submitted to DHEC. They'll work through a plan to actually work on how that media is managed.
Okay.
On top of that, we'll also have things in our covenants. So there will be covenants, conditions, and restrictions on this site. And one of the things that we will put in that is a restriction on gardening
Gotcha.
because of the
soil.
ink in the
Okay.
soil. So,
Gotcha.
and as he alluded to, of course, we haven't pushed any dirt out there yet. I'm sure you drive by it and you see, it still looks like it's in its original condition. However, we have, already hired a group to remove the asbestos. We wanted to go ahead and do that because we did have surveyors and designers and people going through there and working on the design of the property, and we didn't want to subject anybody to the asbestos that was in the buildings. So that has been removed, and we
Okay.
did go ahead and remove the barrels for the same reason. There were old ink barrels left. But the rest of it will all be within the site, and we'll have to wait till DHEC tells us how we can manage it.
Okay. Thank you. And that was for transparency.
Yes, yes, for transparency.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Any other questions on that note? Thank you, Ms. Ellenberg. No, I appreciate those questions, Counselor Sullivan, and giving the public confidence that we're doing our due diligence is important. So, all those, is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of passage of ordinance 7-24-1 on second reading, please indicate saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And annexation is approved. Next, we move on to ordinance 7-24-2, an ordinance of the City of Lawrence imposing a planning assessment period on permits, approvals, and other authorizations of subdivisions, multifamily developments, new or relocated manufactured homes within the city for a period of 6 months. This planning period, as we discussed last month, allows us to complete the process of passing our comprehensive plan and updating our zoning ordinance to meet the moment and be prepared for the future. I'm happy to report to City Council that I have received first drafts of both. And so while passage of this on second reading would put in place a pause for the next 6 months, there's nothing to say that it must stick around for 6 months. And if we do our work quickly, as I hope we will, we can do away with the need for that sooner than 6 months. So, are there any motions concerning this ordinance?
I move that we accept on 07-24-2.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Sullivan?
I'm so sorry to be the pest of the group. This question is, basically because of the recent information that we seen in the news concerning our county council, constituents. So this question is only, for clarification. The groups that are on the planning commission board, zoning board, and what's the other one that you just stated? Planning, all the committees, basically. For clarification, are we sure that none of those personnel on the board are any relation to anybody on council?
Ms. Sullivan, that matters not before city council. This has nothing to do with our boards.
Okay.
This has to do with putting in place a pause on accepting new applications for new housing subdivisions, et cetera, for the next 6 months.
Right. And I was just asking that question for clarification if something would ever come back towards us, even if we pass this. And if someone that is on those boards or in relation to somebody on council, then it could be a negative for us in court.
Ms. Sullivan, I would say respectfully that I believe the question is out of order because it doesn't
Okay.
pertain to the ordinance in front of us. I will say, though, that the members of the board were appointed by city council at large.
Yes, I was a part of it.
So,
I'd like to make a comment on that. It's highly out of order, because there's only one person on this council that has somebody on one of the boards that's related to me. And she knows who that is.
Point of information.
I'm talking.
I'll-
Let
I'll-
you talk, I'm talking.
I'll,
There's no conflict of
Councilor
interest.
Lowry,
This has been
respectfully,
discussed before in
respectfully, let me keep order.
I think this is way out of order.
Okay.
Councilor Lowry, respectfully, I understand the feeling. With respect, Ms. Sullivan, I rolled the question out of order.
Yes, sir, I said.
And I would ask that that decision stand.
It is way out of order.
Councilor Lowry,
It is,
I would ask that you respect my ruling there, and let's move on.
I think I think it puts down what my wife has done and how hard my wife has worked for this city. A lot harder than some people in this council.
Councilor Lowry and Councilor Sullivan, let's move right along. Are there any further questions regarding this ordinance, which is the sole thing before us at this moment? All right, hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor of second reading of ordinance 7-24-2, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Madam Clerk, please note that the vote was 6-1 with Councilor Sullivan voting against. All right, that takes us to the new business before us. There's an item to appoint members to the Lawrence Public Housing Authority. We had one member of the Lawrence Public Housing Authority, Mr. Jim Barton, who tendered his resignation from that board. We've not yet received a nomination for a substitute member, and so I would ask that that matter be tabled at this time, since we have no member to appoint at this moment.
I have a question. What area did he represent? Was that district,
It,
area or just at Lawrence? Or just-
it's just at large. There's no particular district or anything. I will say, while we're on that topic, before we move on, that I had the pleasure with speaking to the executive director and site manager of our housing authority. It was a very productive conversation. I reiterated the importance of that relationship between the housing authority to the city, and I request that regular reports be made from the housing authority to city council. But we also had the opportunity to discuss opportunities to work together to plan so that this facility, which has 70-year-old housing units, could, so that the housing services that are being provided could be improved. We look forward to those further discussions and an opportunity for city council to ask their own questions.
Yes, because I'm glad,
Ms. Miller?
I'm glad to hear that, because those up there, they are very, 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 very obsolete. And if you go to other cities, you will see how they have upgraded their other houses to duplex more or less, or either really good. Everybody but Lawrence, you go to Greenville, Charlotte, Enid, Spartanburg, they have really, public housing has really upgraded their apartments. And, we are the last one that seemed to be there. So I'm glad that you met with them. There's a new director up there, a manager.
Since this matter last came before city council and the former, the regional director for the South Carolina Public Housing Authority, Brian Griswold, who also oversaw the Lawrence Public Housing Authority, no longer oversees our housing authority because it is independent and standalone now. The new director, Mark Nazelnick, and his assistant, Emily, came to my office. We had an opportunity to discuss that exact thing. Now, I will say, I wish we had the bank account, or that our housing authority had the bank account of Greenville or Spartanburg or Charlotte or Greenwood. But the first step in moving forward, while we don't have, I want to make clear, not only members of city council, and I know that y'all are probably well aware of this, but just so the public is aware, we have no direct supervisory role, any authority to dictate the policy of that board. Unlike the boards and commissions, Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, Historic Preservation Commission, that are bound by the determinations of city council, that is an independent and separate board. But under state law, we do appoint their members. So in that spirit, I am very encouraged that the leadership at the Housing Authority seems to be open to moving in a different direction than we've done for the last 70 years. And I want to under-promise and over-deliver, but that's a heck of a step in the right direction. So hopefully we'll have some other productive meetings and bring that back before City Council, along with a new name to appoint to that authority. All right, so that takes us to our next matter, which is approval of a preliminary plat, 8-24-1, which is also on the Watts Mill site. We have received a recommendation from the Planning Commission, which states, "Dear council members, on Monday, August 19th, 2024 at 11 a.m., Lawrence City of Lawrence Planning Commission, after review and discussion, voted unanimously in favor of approving preliminary plat 8-24-1, ordinance 7-24-1 as described in the agenda below." That's both approval of the preliminary plat that you have before you and the annexation ordinance, which we already approved. The Planning Commission's review and recommendations here was in compliance with the law, and so this matter is properly before us for consideration. Because this is not an ordinance, there is only one approval required, and so this vote, if in the affirmative, would be all that is required for approval of preliminary plat. Do I hear any motions concerning this plat?
I make a motion that we accept plat 08-24-01 as accepted.
And I will say,
We have a motion from Councilor Campbell and a second from Councilor Bolt. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approval of the plat as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, no. Madam Clerk, please note that the vote was 6 in the affirmative, 1 abstention from Councilor Sullivan. All righty, moving on to the fifth item before us, third item of new business. We have a resolution relating to the declaration of intent by the City of Lawrence to reimburse certain expenditures made by the Lawrence Commission of Public Works prior to the issuance by the city of its combined utility system revenue bonds. If I have a motion and a second, I would be glad to.
I'll make a motion so you can explain.
Yes.
I believe that was a motion from Counselor Lowry and a second from Counselor Miller. Is there any discussion? I believe so. Who's first?
Can you explain this, John?
Sure, I'll make it a 10.
Would you like me to take a first pass at it?
I did sleep in Holiday Inn.
It's a word salad, I know that, but, no, seriously.
Basically, what this is declaring that we will prepay for some of the items that will eventually be included in the bond that we're getting ready to issue. In other words, this is one of the IRS regulations saying that we have to declare that we're prepaying out of our expense, some items that we hope, or we are sure that we get reimbursed whenever the bond is, that we can cover for the bond. If that makes sense. But it's something, the bond attorney told us that we need to do, so. Okay.
Mr. Young, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is, and again, it's for the public's benefit, that we don't hold too many things over CPW's head these days, but because City Council created the Commission of Public Works back in 1922, as a creation of City Council and under state law, we have a responsibility to, as City Council, to approve any debt that is issued by, or that is sought by the Commissioner of Public Works. And so, as I understand it, the bond has not yet been submitted, but there are expenditures which are needed in the short term.
That's correct. We have a certain amount of time, I believe it's 18 months, to get all these expenditures in. And this is primarily for the engineering work ahead of time for some of these projects. So we feel like we need to go ahead and pay for them now, hoping that when the bond gets passed, we can use the proceeds to reimburse ourselves for those expenditures.
And so, in effect, this resolution, because the debt would be approved by the City of Lawrence, the City of Lawrence is confirming our intent out of the proceeds of that bond to reimburse CPW for the expenses in the short term. And would it be correct to say that the funds for the repayment of any expenses which CPW is undertaking in the short term will not be paid out of the general funds from the city, but rather through the proceeds of that bond, which would be issued at a later date? All right. No further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Young? Thank you for your assistance, John. All right. Is there any further questions by any council at all related to this resolution?
What we've done to a lot of extent in the past. So, we've always had to approve their bond and all that. So,
We're just letting them spend money for the bond.
I think,
Spending money before the bond, they're gonna get the bonds.
correct. Sort of taking it on faith that city council is going to approve it on the second time around. Not that much faith, though, because we're passing a resolution saying we're going to. All righty. Is there any further discussion? All right. Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of approval of Resolution 8-24-1, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the resolution is approved. Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is Resolution 8-24-2. There are a few tools that the city has in its toolbox to incentivize those things that we want to bring to our city and we feel would be helpful. And one of those is certification of abandoned textile mill site tax credits. And upon certification by City Council for those tax credits, the recipient of those tax credits would be able to use those to offset the cost of bringing about whatever we are incentivizing on that site. So before us is Resolution 8-24-2, which certifies the property located at 200 Lucas Avenue, that is the former Watts Mill site, as an abandoned textile mill site under the South Carolina Textile Communities Revitalization Act, and provide for inclusion of that property into a multi-county industrial or business park. Are there any motions concerning this resolution?
So moved, we accept ordinance 08-2401.
Second.
For point of clarification, I believe you meant to. Thank you. I heard what you meant. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of this certification and approval of the resolution, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the resolution is approved. The last two items on your agenda come to us by way of the Municipal Association of South Carolina. And the Municipal Association is available to us, should we authorize them to do so, to act as the claimant agency for the collection of debt on behalf of the City of Laurens in accordance with the Set-Off Debt Collection Act. But in order for them to do so, we have to not only pass a resolution authorizing the Municipal Association to do that, but to pass an ordinance relating to the recovery of collection costs as part of delinquent debts collected pursuant to the Set-Off Debt Collection Act. So in essence, passing a resolution which authorizes that locally. So if there are any questions about that, I would entertain a motion in a second, and then I'll let our city administrator answer them.
I make a motion that we adopt Resolution 8-2403.
Thank you, Councilor Lattimore. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilor Lowry. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I do have a question. Would you give us examples, just for clarity and transparency, of what types of debts these would be connected to,
Yes, ma'am.
so that there are no surprises in the future?
So basically, we have delinquent garbage collections from when we had the $11 a month service. It's probably around $60,000 in unpaid collections. What this will do is that this would go on the income taxes for those people that owe the city money. There's a process where if they feel like this is not a fair, collections, they can write and appeal the process, and then a hearing officer will oversee the case. So there is a way to appeal this. It's not just we're going through a collections on someone's account.
Very good, and I'm glad for that clarification, because what I want us to be able to understand is that if there's a calamity in someone's family, a health issue, a death, and such, what would the recourse be? So you've spelled that out to us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. Are there any further questions concerning this resolution?
And that's just things concerning the city that's in debt.
Any debt where the city is entitled to collect on the debt?
Okay.
Councilor Miller.
This, I want to refer, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna ask a question and then you say, when we had community development grant, and not pertaining to this, but it pertaining to debt collection, you can help somebody else. So I'm glad to see this in place, because some people on the Holmes area, who, in the Jersey area, that they get rehab to their home, they were supposed to pay the city back, and through the mayors or city administrators, it fell through the cracks.
Mm.
And I can say this by when Councilman Griffin was on the council representing the Holmes Court area, he saw to those people that they will pay. After his death, seemed like everybody just stopped paying.
Mm.
So I'm glad to see this in place, and I hope that it will go, for the future also.
I have a question and comment as well to make on this resolution. You said that they can file an appeal. Does this has anything to do with hardship or anything like that?
Yes, ma'am. I believe the hearing officer can make the decision.
Okay.
So there is,
Because I'm gonna be transparent, I'm one of the persons, probably the only one on council right now that is dealing with hardship. And I have delinquent things that I'm facing now. I'm not ashamed of it. And it's not anything concerning, my intentions. It was something that happened, that I found out recently that was a sort of tort. So there's different things that play a part in that, so I'm glad to hear that they can appeal it and then make their request known about the appeal as it relates to health hardship or anything else. Second thing is there any other city or town that has, or just something new or that started this process that I could read up on how it's working?
yes, ma'am. You can go to the Municipal Association's website and read
Okay.
about it. But also CPW does it themselves. And,
Good.
I've been asked to be the hearing officer on some of their cases.
Okay, and then the last thing is, I know we're passing this or we're reading about it now on council. And I know the mayor do a good thing about placing things in the paper where the public is aware. Have you placed anything like that in so that they know for clarification of what we're facing, as Ms. Campbell just stated, so nothing springs up on anybody? Right.
Do you want me to answer that?
Certainly.
So, you would not be reported till December 1st, so people have until December 1st. We've sent out many collection notices asking people to pay their bills before that. So there is awareness, but we could do another campaign in the media or something too. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much for that clarification.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think
We don't have nobody representing.
the answer the city administrator gave was a great one. I want to give my staff credit for being the ones who do a good job of publishing notices. But I will say, I mean, because we are at a public meeting and we have members of the press here and those that aren't here are listening on the World Wide Web, the public has the opportunity to hear about these things, and that's why we have these open meetings. So this should count, because we've sent out so many notices, these debts shouldn't catch anybody by surprise.
Exactly right, and I want to clear this up. Everybody, when the city was doing the garbage collection of those fees, they was very lenient on a whole lot of people. They waived a whole lot due to hardship. I went with 2 of them myself, so it's not nothing they spring up on people. They really, I can't say about the office at the City Hall. They give people a second chance, hardship and whatnot, but no one know your situation if you don't tell them. So I'm not gonna down the City Hall or anyone spring anything, because people know. Now, I'm going through hardship myself, but I know that it got to be paid. If you tell somebody hardship, they will listen. We're not no cold-hearted people in Lawrence. We are some of the strongest, sweetest, caring people it is. I'm sorry.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ms. Miller.
And I hope.
Amen.
I hope that my initiation of this conversation did not project that I think that we're being unfair to anybody. So I hope I wasn't misunderstood on that, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this is coming, because this is gonna be harsh for some people who, are in situations, we'll put it that way.
Hopefully, it gives council reassurance. If there hasn't been grace before,
Yeah.
there's still an opportunity for grace in the future if need be.
I have a question.
Ms. Lattimore.
Mayor, this ordinance that we put in
If-
place about cleaning up your property.
Mr. Bolt, I don't mean to call you back, but I think Ms. Lattimore beat you to it, and then I'll be glad to get to Ms. Lattimore.
There are some people, some people that is now living in Lawrence. I don't know whether they came through by the city, because they don't have trash cans. And I think that's when they come in and sign up as a resident, don't they supposed to pay for something then when they come in?
With
Paper.
respect, I think that sort of gets into a different procedural issue about signing up for trash service, but on the point at hand, none of the debt that we would be addressing through this resolution is new. It's not recent.
I
Would
know.
that be a fair statement, Mr. Delgado?
No, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Bolt?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the order we passed here a couple of months ago about people cleaning up the yards and,
Oh, yeah.
and one thing and another. You know, and we're gonna give them a chance to do it. And they don't do that. And do we have any way of, so this goes, it may cost the city something to come and get some of that stuff cleaned up, I don't know, and bill them like we do cutting grass and all, I don't know, so.
So if I understand your question correctly, in the future, let's say, for instance, there is a cost incurred by the city for cleaning up property because somebody has violated an ordinance, would this resolution apply to any debt they might have to the city for violation of that city ordinance?
Yeah, that's kind of a roundabout way.
My understanding, and our city administrator may be able to clarify this better than I could, but my understanding is that in order for the city to collect on those sorts of expenses, we would be required to put in place a tax lien on the property.
Like cutting grass.
For instance, cutting grass. And that's one of the reasons, not to go down this rabbit trail too far, but from time to time, we get calls, members of city council say, can't we go ahead and just cut this yard? And sometimes, that for the good of the public, it makes sense to do that, but we don't want to have a socialized yard care service that cuts every yard that isn't properly maintained, because it is so hard for us to recoup those costs. If we jump through all the hoops to actually put the lien on the property, we may never see a dime of it unless and until the property is actually sold. So I may be mistaken, Mr. Delgado, you can correct me if I am, but I don't believe that this would apply in that circumstance. Is that correct?
So I'll answer two different questions. The first one would be, if we maintain someone's property, we demoed a house, you wanted to put a tax lien. Generally speaking, from working with the county treasurer, that's not an option right now. So that's why we don't do that. Number two, I think this was only related to services, like garbage. We have to provide a direct service. We can't just charge somebody for grass cutting.
So fees that were imposed by the city for a specific service?
Yes, sir, that's a clear answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess one big question too is because I see so much stuff that people set out beside the road being picked up. I see people that ought to have dumpsters, businesses that have dumpsters, sitting on the side of the road, we pick it up. We've got to get a hand on that somewhere too. I mean, that's, something's got to, we know we'll keep this city clean.
I appreciate those thoughts. I want to keep us rolling with regard to this specific resolution, so I'll be happy to address that administrative point with you offline. Mr. Lowry.
So, based on what you just said, with working with the county, we have no recourse as far as, getting our funds back for either cutting grass or what about tearing down structures? Do we put a lien against the property when we tear down a structure?
Right, I don't want to get into a county-city matter too much, but from my understanding, that's up to the treasurer's office. And the last time we had those discussions, the impression that I got is that we wouldn't recruit money, so they're not willing to really do that process for us, because we rely on them to do that, if that makes sense.
But a lien against a piece of property is not something that.
But they would have to collect the money once it sells for us and give it back to us.
So,
Now, I know, I'm only gonna speak from a standpoint of a mechanic's lien. You have to clear the lien before the property is sold. So is this not the same thing when you're liening the property? I know it's a tax lien, it's a little different, so I'm gonna speak out of turn here. I don't know how that works. So if it's a tax lien that has to go through the county to be collected?
Yes, sir, from my understanding.
Okay.
let's, this is all good conversation, and I don't want
I
to
understand.
rule anybody out of order on it, but I also don't want to,
And Nathan, I wasn't trying
Yeah.
to get away from what we're passing here, but I was trying to get a little bit of a understanding of what this will enable us to do.
sure.
If we can't collect money for cutting grass through a tax lien, is it possible to collect it through this?
I think, you pose a hypothetical, so I think the best I could do would be to answer it in a hypothetical. And I say this in full disclosure without having thoroughly researched it and discussed it with our attorney. But from what I understand, from what Mr. Delgado has said, that the reason that this is available to us is because it is a specific fee related to a specific service that has been rendered. And in that sense, it is very finite and, or definite, maybe is a better way of putting it. And so there's not a whole lot of wiggle room for interpretation,
Okay, so,
if I may. So the municipal association is collecting this because that is a service that was provided, billed, and can easily be documented. If we were to hypothetically, in a future budget, in a future year, or I guess an amended budget in this year, create a new fee which does not currently exist in our fee schedule for house demolition, and that house demolition fee were a set fee, I don't know why it wouldn't apply in the same way as a garbage collection fee, but I will say I don't know what I don't know.
well, you were going right where I was going. You know, if you're saying that it has to be a predetermined fee in order for this debt collection to apply, then as a council, we need to figure out some way to recoup the cost that we're incurring for cutting people's grass because they won't do it, or tearing down a structure. In the past, it's been placing a tax lien against the property. Now that that's not available to us for whatever reason, which I would like to know at a future time why we can't do that anymore, then we've got to come up with something different to do that. And if there's a way we can come up with a fee structure so that it says, hey, this is no different than a trash collection fee. It's called your grass cutting fee. And collect it through this, then I think we need to explore it.
That is an excellent discussion for a future date about
And
about a
I'll
possible.
make one last point, and that'll be the end of my points on this. We all are sitting here, and we all know that we've all been approached about why, just what you just said, why don't you cut the grass on that? Why don't you tear down that old building? Well, now I can say, well, we can't do it because we can't collect the money back. So we need to figure out how to collect the money back so that we can tell our constituents, yes, we're gonna take care of it, and they're gonna pay. Now, I'll tell you what, you take their money a few times, they'll try to pay. And I'm not talking about
I am in favor of avoiding.
I'm not talking about a kid for $10 cutting the grass. I'm talking about making it feel a little bit. I mean, seriously, it's all about responsibility. It's all about responsibility. Be responsible and cut your grass. And we are very lenient about it. Going back to what Ms. Miller said, we're a very gracious bunch. And we have been very gracious to people in the past about keeping up their property and cleaning up their property and giving them more and more opportunities. So I'm not talking about being hard about it, but I'm talking about we gotta, yeah, we've all had it.
Make on that. I apologize for being harsh.
Thanks,
to you.
Councilor Lowry. Councilor Sullivan.
I think I'll be looking at things, what I'm thinking is, who it's gonna affect. And then the next question is, this is mostly like, I guess certain different businesses.
No, ma'am, this would be residential trash pickup. This is
This both-
$11 a month that somebody just didn't pay.
Okay. Well, the way I'm looking at it is because if they're not paying it, then there must be a different problem. So I'm saying that because I don't wanna offend nobody. I'm looking at it from a different perspective. That's all.
So,
Do that make
Ms.
sense to you,
Sullivan,
Mayor?
I take your point, but
Where's that?
that, I believe, is the reason that there is a recourse available to people who would contest the debt
That it could be. a-
and, or ask for leniency in enforcement. So by city council simply asking, as Councilor Lowry put it, for personal accountability for people to pay for the services that they're rendered, does not foreclose the possibility that if there was an accounting error on the city's part and somebody really didn't owe it, that they could
I was just making a point.
to ask that debt be discharged, or that a payment plan be instituted, or whatever options the hearing officer would have
Right,
available.
yeah, that'd be good.
But that could be made on an individualized basis if we approve this, rather than a blanket determination by city council that just because somebody might have a valid reason for having not paid it, that nobody has to.
Yeah, but
Be accountable.
it's gotta be a large problem for us to making an ordinance, and so what I'm saying
About
is.
$60,000.
Right, so what I'm saying is, then the problem must be different. That's the point, that's all I'm saying, it could be a different problem.
I believe that these are just related to very aged accounts that just have not been paid in a timely fashion.
Okay. Maybe not.
Alrighty. Before we hear first reading on the People's Republic of Lawrence lawn service, I will call the question on approval of this resolution, 8-24-3. All those in favor of approval of the resolution, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Madam Clerk, please note that the resolution has passed 6-1 with Ms. Sullivan voting in the negative. Alrighty, moving on to the second portion of this discussion is the ordinance that we would pass locally, which actually authorizes this in our own law and would bring us into conformity with the requirements of the Set-Off Debt Collection Act passed by the legislature. Do I hear any motions concerning ordinance 8-24-1?
I'll make a motion, we accept ordinance
We have a motion and a second. I think Mr. Bolt got in there just under the wire, Ms. Miller. And I appreciate Counselor Lowry's good humor about my gentle ripping there. Is there any further discussion? We got it all out of our systems. If so, I will call the question. All those in favor of passage of the ordinance 8-24-1 on first reading, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Ordinance passes 7-1 with Ms. Sullivan voting against. All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And so I turn to our August Mayor Pro Tem.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn this
Oh,
meeting.
thanks.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I think there's some discussion because there's one more comment that was requested to be made.
Oh. Yes, this is where I called the people in Greenwood about our streets here to be paved. I know they've done some, and this man's name was, Dusty, I guess written down. Anyway, that's what these are, and everyone can look at them. And he said he didn't have a map of our cities. Pass one on, give everybody.
So these would be our cities,
That's some of them.
state-owned streets that are in the
Yeah.
city.
And he said to get some of them, but he was looking for our cities online. But he said none of them was there. So I sent him what I thought of, but that. And that's what he showed me what was in contract to be done and when it's gonna be done. Because, we asked y'all to check and that's when yeah, that's from DOT.
We'll be glad to follow up with this on DOT,
Okay.
with DOT. Is there any further discussion which would prevent our adjournment? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Okay.
Glory, glory.
Hallelujah.
Get hungry. Expect to see you wearing that.